So, as of my filming this breakdown, Marvel has left the block on the trailer footage that they had put on when it debuted a couple of months ago at San Diego Comic-Con. They didn't want it to leak, even though they leaked part of it themselves in like a What's Next in Marvel spot like a couple of weeks ago. But anyway, they haven't bothered to try and lift that block. I don't know if they're a little ticked off with some of the negative, toxic coverage of their content, or it's an interesting situation. But they have not removed the block, so that's why I wasn't able to react to the trailer, and that's why I'm doing a different type of breakdown. I'm going to do the stills breakdown, but don't worry, this is in some ways perhaps even better because there are pluses and minuses. I like being able to go over specific shots with you and the flow of the trailer, which I can do in a classic breakdown. But this way, we still have plenty of information to go over, and I will share my thoughts on the trailer with you. All right, so remember when Kevin Feige heard about Batman v Superman and thought, that's a good idea, yoink, and he ended up trouncing that movie good. Well, obviously, audiences love the idea of Suicide Squad. It's become a huge brand for DC, right up there with the Justice League at this point, even if the movies haven't really been on steady ground. And DC, to some degree, still struggles to capitalize on the popularity of the Suicide Squad, not for lack of trying. And so Feige once again thinks, good idea. Yoink! Enter Thunderbolts. The Thunderbolts is a long-running comic book, which, to be honest with you, is okay. I'm sure a couple of, one or two of you are like, Dear Grace, it's the best comic book ever written. Well, I'm glad you like it so much. It's originally a team of villains. Originally, it was a team of villains pretending to be superheroes. And over the years, they've continued to assemble for different reasons, usually involving trying to get a pardon for their previous crimes. And they sometimes work with heroes who are either going through their own rough times or feel they can help these villains. There are no neck bombs, though. It's still Marvel. No, but it doesn't go that far. Now, the comic, it has a couple of fans. They keep bringing it back, but then I think there's something to be said for the fact they keep rebooting it and playing around with the roster because they're like, this is a good idea, darn it. We can make this work. And you're like, can you? And they're like, well, try this one. It's had many rosters over the years, none of which, by the way, look like this roster for the movie. I mean, all of these characters, or most of these characters, have been on the Thunderbolts at one point, but not at the same time. This doesn't look like any of the versions of the team in the comics. The most notable Thunderbolts members are Baron Zemo, the leader. Basically, he started out as the Amanda Waller early on. And Songbird, who was basically the team's Harley Quinn, although Feige has his own Harley Quinn here as well, as we'll discuss. Songbird's power, besides having a cool look, her power is a sonic scream, like Black Canary. But apparently she can do other things with sonic waves as well, like blasts, etc. Neither Zemo nor Songbird seem to be in this movie, which is weird because Baron Zemo is already in the MCU and has been made quite popular thanks to Falcon and Winter Soldier. He's even currently in government custody, although, last time we saw him. And Songbird could easily fill in for Taskmaster. Nobody wants Taskmaster here. Although that would mean introducing two new characters along with Sentry, and this is a movie, not a series. Do they have that kind of time? And Songbird would compete with Yelena for screen time, and they would be competing Harley Quinn types in the movie, and that seems unnecessary. And Yelena, I'm loving Yelena here, so I would like to keep Florence Pugh. Thank you very much. Hawkeye, by the way, speaking of MCU characters, and Yelena, of course, appeared in his series. Hawkeye has a very long history with the Thunderbolts as well, but is not involved in this film either. The Thunderbolts, though, are actually the most famous for becoming the Dark Avengers. When post-Civil War, so during Civil War, it was Norman Osborn who talked the U.S. government into policing superheroes, and he used the Thunderbolts as his enforcers. Then, after Civil War was over and the superheroes were, dealing with the repercussions of that, Norman Osborn started Hammer, his version of S.H.I.E.L.D. Norman Osborn was considered legit, although we all knew that he wasn't as comic book readers. But he started Hammer. Victoria Hand was his second in command, who has a look, by the way, a lot like the MCU's Val. and used the Avengers as a front, with himself and the Thunderbolts pretending to be the latest heroes to wear the mantles that the general public loved. Sentry, by the way, was also a member on that team. All right, so let's transition to over to the MCU and how Feige has handled these same developments. Because, you know, the comic book offered a really nice blueprint. And Feige, you know, it's interesting. It's, you know, we've been like, George R.R. Martin, stop picking on House of the Dragon. Although little changes have blossomed or butterflied, as George R.R. Martin put it, into real problems now for the MCU. And so maybe that's what George R.R. Martin was talking about. But anyway, here, General Ross has been filling in for Norman Osborn, or at least he was. And now, though, he's over in Captain America 4 as President Ross, and he's now become the Red Hulk, who's been on the Thunderbolts, by the way. And General Ross's nickname is Thunderbolt, but in the comics, the team was actually not named after him. What? That's ridiculous. And he's not in this movie. Again, he's not in the movie. He's over in Captain America 4 as the villain. Well, he starts out as the villain. I'm sure like all Marvel villains, he'll either be killed or redeemed to some degree, as we'll discuss here, because that's a little bit of a problem now that they're trying to assemble a team of villains. All right, so enter Val, who again seems to be partially modeled after Victoria Hand. A lot of us felt that way as soon as we saw her. She's named after a different character in the comics, but she's very Victoria Hand coded. And she seems to be taking over for Norman Osborn to actually run the group herself, who are not only a ragtag group within the MCU, but of the MCU. You got a mix of Disney Plus characters here and characters from movies that were not particularly well received by fans. Oh, way to make it a challenge, Feige. With the exception, of course, of Bucky, who is a huge fan favorite, known for incredible action sequences. However, word has been that he does not have a huge part in the movie, although that was going around a while ago, so hopefully they realized what a mistake that was and have added more of him to the film. But one big reason that some of us are excited to see him included here, not only because of his history with the team and because he's a cool character, but because in the comics, Bucky ended up having a pretty hot romance with Natasha, brought together by their shared history of mind control and brainwashing by Russia. So many of us are thinking that in the MCU, perhaps it'll be Bucky and Yelena who become a couple. Although I gotta say, I don't know if Bucky, as formidable as he is, can handle this version of Yelena, because she has major main character energy. I'm loving her here. Although I don't know, I could see them maybe as a couple. It would be interesting. Also, this movie, what do you think? Do you see them together maybe? Also, this movie's major calling card is obviously supposed to be the introduction of Sentry to the MCU, aka Bob, who I think they're hoping might be their Homelander, and we're already seeing some coding for that. We'll talk about all the characters in depth in just a moment, but first I want to share my overall thoughts on the trailer, particularly because I wasn't able to post my reaction. It doesn't look as cinematic as I would like it to, and it does seem a little bit more restrained than Deadpool and Wolverine. Like Feige still has full control over this movie. He did seem to step back a bit from Deadpool and Wolverine and let Ryan Reynolds work his magic, which we all appreciated. And also I would say that this trailer, I think, needs more action. It makes me a little bit concerned that the film does not have enough action. But I like the characters here so much, the main personalities, that I'm still very interested in the film. And I'm hoping that it will end up delivering on the action when all is said and done. Although right now, if you told me this was an upcoming Disney Plus series, I'd believe you. That's what it looks like to me. Not only because of the characters that have been chosen, but also while I loved Beef, that was also a streaming series as well. So you don't have, I think the director there might have worked on one movie, but you don't have like really legit movie experience on, you know, any of the behind the scenes talent here, which might be having an effect on the way the film looks. I also don't feel any of these characters are that evil. With Dark Avengers, it was like, whoa. Like Bullseye was posing as Hawkeye, Venom was posing as Spider-Man, Wolverine's evil son, Dakin, was posing as his dad, and you had Norman freaking Osborn, drawn to look like Tommy Lee Jones, as Iron Patriot. Here, these are already anti-heroes. You're like, you guys are already kind of good guys, right? So it takes a little of the punch out of the team when they're first introduced. You're not like, oh, this is a team of villains. You're like, oh yeah, it's the B or C team. Although I think, I'll just say it here, I guess. I think what's interesting though is that because, you know, the MCU unfortunately makes the choice to kill or redeem its villains as soon as they're introduced, like right away in the same project, movie or series. While that sucks for forming the Thunderbolts, it does seem to be how they've adjusted the raison d'etre of the team. Because once the MCU redeems these villains, they don't do anything with them really, besides Loki, who got his own series. But, for the most part, they just are lost. They don't really have anything to do. They're like, glad you're not so evil anymore. See ya. And they're like, what am I going to do? All right, so let's talk about characters. Harley Quinn. When she was added to the Suicide Squad, it was quite a controversial choice. It was part of the New 52, and everybody felt it was a prime example at the time of why the New 52 was garbage. She was hooking up with a Deadshot. We were all like, what's happening? Although I must say, thanks to David Ayer's movie, and Margot Robbie, she deserves a lot of the credit, even though I think that they just really changed the character of Harley Quinn. But you can't deny, no matter how comic book and animation fans feel about it, it's undeniable that with mainstream audiences, Margot Robbie's Harley Quinn put Suicide Squad on the map. And so I think going forward, you always need a Harley Quinn for a team like this. And sure enough, Feige has one in Yelena, who Florence Pugh is doing a wonderful job bringing to life. Another brutal blonde who's surprisingly funny. Pugh's comedic timing is particularly strong, and as it has been from day one with this character. And she's also an incredibly strong actress, right? And she's really able to sell the emotional core of this film, which again, as I just said, is, these villains are redeemed, but now they feel lost. They have no purpose. They're not being utilized. Yelena is clearly depressed. She's cut off all her hair and given herself Bucky's haircut. When they did this cut in the trailer, I was like, Buck. Oh, no, I thought it was Yelena going into that hearing. But instead it was Bucky. I was like, you guys have a couple's haircut. Her half-heartedly doing a mission here, I think, is hilarious. And I do suspect that when the movie starts, she's already working for Val and not enjoying it. Because remember, at the end of Black Widow, it was established in the end credits scene that she would be working for Val. Also, it said that this is Val's assistant in the film. Although some Thunderbolts fans are holding out hope she's going to maybe turn into Songbird by the end of the movie. Yelena, obviously, I don't think she's having a good time, but she's doing it because she thinks she's doing good. But we'll likely find out that she's not been doing good. And while Val probably thinks it's okay to manipulate villains, like, they deserve it, and who cares, they're broken, what are they going to do about it? Val will likely she'll find out that it's not okay to do that, right? Hence the tagline, careful who you assemble. And it's Val who's doing the assembling. We see Val at a Battle of New York exhibit honoring our heroes, which is obviously meant, I think, for Val to be hiding behind heroes just like Norman Osborn did, but also rubbing it in the face of our anti-heroes that they're not full-on heroes, which the world prefers. So I think that's a nice idea. Yelena brings in her dad. She brings in her Black Widow program sister in Taskmaster. And too bad her mom isn't here as well, as Iron Maiden, while she wasn't so great in the movie, she ended up being a great villain in that fantastic What If Season 2 episode where Rachel Weisz returned to voice the character. I'd have plussed Yelena's costume to make it a bit more Harley Quinn-esque, to be honest with you, to make it a little bit more appealing to the straight male eye. Everybody loves that stuff. Everybody loves a good costume, to be honest with you. But Florence Pugh is so fantastic. Her personality and comedy is just such a fireball that I hope that is enough anyway. I will say the movie is a little short on sex appeal, which has been one of Suicide Squad's main things. Male or female. Even Deadpool and Wolverine had sex appeal. So I'm surprised, considering how much Beefcake built the MCU, Feige knows about it. I'm surprised that note was not given to these filmmakers. All right, then Bucky is obviously a huge draw here. The metal arm in the dishwasher is a great gag and honestly very relatable. I think we've all washed something that doesn't belong in the dishwasher, right? For me, I popped my humidifier in there once. Don't worry, I ran it again afterwards. But you're like, how am I going to clean this? And you don't want to have to scrub it. It takes a lot of time. Although why didn't Wakanda give him some way to clean the arm? All right, what kind of a store are they running over there? I guess the answer is it's not a store. All right, he seems to be on to Val working on her own. I think he's investigating Val. That's what it looks like to me in this trailer. And he finds out she's assembled her own team. So he goes after them at first, but then maybe he's recruited to join or he volunteers to join to find out what's really going on, right? He puts himself undercover. The big new character is Sentry, who was supposed to be Stephen Yeun. But the rumor is that Marvel was not too pleased that he told friends who he was playing, who then leaked it. And so now it's Bill Pullman's son, Lewis. That's who's playing the role. He has a couple of things coming up. He was in Lessons in Chemistry. He's in the upcoming Salem's Lot movie that's going to debut on Max in just a few weeks. So, his star is on the rise. He had a small role in Top Gun Maverick. Don't let this poster fool you. Bob is the most dangerous person on the team, not only because he's the most powerful, but because he has a split personality, a la James McAvoy. He is both a hero and villain in one. He's fighting himself. Stop punching yourself, man. Stop punching yourself. He's going to do the MCU version of that. In the comics, Robert Reynolds, aka Bob, was given a version of the super soldier serum. Everybody's getting that thing. But his was boosted somehow, right? And sure enough, when you see in this lab, they seem to be working on the Sentry. That's what was happening in this lab. But here, that seems to be researching the logo and hairstyle. Like they're doing market research on what would be the best logo and hairstyle, which is interesting to me. That's very Homelander. And Pullman even looks a little bit like Anthony Starr. I guess maybe when Stephen Yeun didn't work out, they decided to just go full-on Homelander ripoff. Again, Kevin Feige saw an idea that he thought was cool and said, yoink! He never gets, everyone, we'll see. So far, so good. I think it would be hard to duplicate the magic of Homelander, though, but we'll see. Maybe Yelena's solo mission that we see here, robbing that government lab, is to get ingredients to make Sentry, which would be great because that would make her feel responsible for him, not just for victimizing poor Bob, but also anything bad that he might do as Sentry once he was given the power that she enabled him to get. Oh, I like that. I like that a lot. That's a strong emotional hook. In the comics, he's basically Superman, but all we see here is that he seems to be bulletproof. Rumor has it he'll actually be very comics accurate by the end of this movie. And on that note, if he's going to get a cape, I don't think he'd have a cape if he couldn't fly, so expect him to take off. The villain half of him is called the Void in the comics and has a totally different set of powers. And we'll see if the MCU goes that far. It would be expensive. It's a totally different set of powers. It would be difficult. It would be complex to explain. And as we also know at this point, Kevin Feige likes to keep it simple. I think just making him mentally unstable, so you never know if you're dealing with a hero or a villain, which is kind of like makes him the poster child or the poster man of the Thunderbolts, right? You don't know if they're heroes or villains either. I think that would be enough. All right, so who's left? You got to have Red Guardian because he fleshes out Yelena's character emotionally. And David Harbour is very funny. Bring on the dad bod. He's great. I liked his line, bulletproof-ish. I thought that was nice. And it makes sense that Yelena would want to bring in people that, she felt she could trust that were hers. And Ghost potentially brings some great action sequences, not only for herself, but it seems maybe she can lend her tech out, like Yelena seems to be using it. But then how does the gravity seem to change on Yelena, right? Maybe that's a dream. We'll find out. Anyway, Joss Whedon, ew, I know, but he wrote a comic. He wrote, Joss Whedon, back in the day, before we knew what a disgusting yucko he was, he wrote an X-Men comic. That's one of the things he did. And he did some really cool fight sequences for another intangible superhero, Kitty Pryde, aka Shadowcat. Great moves. So, and I'm sure Kevin Feige has read those comics. So, although these days apparently he's telling people who work for him they don't have to read the comics. This is the man who gave comics to Hugh Jackman. All right, I hope he gave these comics to this creative team. So Ghost has a lot of potential for action sequences, although that would totally undercut Shadowcat when and if she ever arrives in the MCU. We'd be like, we already have one of you. U.S. Agent and Taskmaster. Again, this is who I'd have subbed in Zemo and Songbird for, or other more villainous MCU characters. I'm not feeling these two. I guess it is cool to see Captain America-style moves in the film. I understand what they're going for, but Wyatt Russell just seems so low energy. I know your character's supposed to be depressed, Wyatt, but you don't have to bring the whole movie down with you. It's called nuance. And Russell just seems very small screen to me. He doesn't seem like a movie actor. You might be like, give him a chance. I am giving him a chance, but so far I'm not impressed. As for as for Taskmaster, while of course I understand her connection to Yelena from the Black Widow movie, do any of us really care? The character just did not end up working out. And her action sequences, she doesn't seem to have the same physical presence that she did in the Black Widow movie. I guess they changed stunt people to who were playing the character. And I think mimicking characters' physical moves is just not that exciting. It's not going to move the needle. It's not like she's mimicking powers like Rogue can do, right? Although there are no flashy powers here to mimic either. Like, if only they'd thought ahead and put X-23 on this team instead. Wouldn't that have been great? Maybe that'll be an end credit scene. Who just got pulled into the MCU in Deadpool and Wolverine. Although I must say, well, Daphne Keane is very good at an action sequence herself, as we saw not only in Deadpool and Wolverine, but also in The Acolyte. Daphne Keane and Florence Pugh have a very similar dynamic. They would maybe potentially cancel each other out. So I'd have to screen test them to see if they would work well together. So that's my breakdown of our first official look at the MCU Thunderbolts. It's basically Yelena's movie. And in that regard, I think it's excellent. It's very, very strong. It's a very strong showcase for Florence Pugh as this character. Pew, pew. I cannot resist doing it. What do you think? How does the movie look to you? What do you think of the roster? Who would you keep? Who would you swap out and for whom? And does this look like a movie for you or a streaming show? All right, so share your thoughts down below. Subscribe today. And of course, as always, you can check out some more videos right now.